I used to be a professional Magic the Gathering player. I spent years grinding tournaments, chasing wins, and telling myself I would never, ever touch Commander. And that mindset stuck with me all through college. Back then, I met this guy at a Magic tournament about an hour away from campus. After the last round, he came up to me and he said, "Hey, are you heading back to campus? Do you want to ride?" Truth be told, I thought he was a super weirdo. Like, why would a random guy I don't know want me to go in the car with him for an hour? So obviously I said no. But the very next week I saw him again at my local game store. We played a few games, we started talking, and before I knew it, this guy became one of my very closest friends. From then on, we spent years playing together, arguing over bad plays, traveling all across the United States, and pulling all-nighters testing for tournaments. And although he doesn't really play anymore, he's the kind of friend who never cared about winning as much as learning and growing. He just loved to play the game. And he always supported me and reminded me that Magic is supposed to be fun and not always a job. Years later, after I finally stepped away from the competitive scene and we parted ways due to moving away from each other for careers, I actually got an envelope in the mail. It was from him. It reads, "Happy belated Tilk. You will probably use this more than I could. I had fun hanging with you and playing F&M. Nate." As you can see from this one little letter, Nate usually isn't the overly emotional type, but he did send me a super cute turtle birthday card, and he is never one to forget about someone's birthday. It was when I saw what was inside that I knew it was him saying, "Hey, don't forget why you love this game." So I built a Commander deck around it, not for me, but for him. The deck is extremely budget and also extremely mean, which is a tie back to us being the best Magic players that we could in college with absolutely no money at all. This deck is a little piece of our friendship, our history, and everything that this game has meant to us. So, what was the card? It was Squall, Seed Mercenary from the Final Fantasy set. When I saw it, I burst out laughing because that F&M he mentioned we attended, he pulled it straight from his first ever Final Fantasy booster. So I knew right then that I wanted to build around it. Not a CEDH deck, just a deck that perfectly captured the way that we played the game in college. Every card in here synergizes perfectly, and it tells a story. It reminds me a lot of the dumb combos that we would put together on Nate's floor at 2 o'clock in the morning while his cat Rufus would just trample all over our cards. And we played way too many copies of those cards because we couldn't afford the better ones. And this weekend, for the first time in a long time, I'm seeing Nate again, and he has no idea that I'm gonna surprise him with this thing. But before that, I wanna show you how this all came together, the card choices, the stories behind them, and why this might be the most personal Commander deck that I'll ever make. So when I decided to build this deck, I had 6 rules. The first one is keep it cheap. We were broke college kids then, so if a card costs more than a hot and ready pizza, which was usually what we lived on for days at a time back then, it's probably too expensive, and I wanted that same energy for this deck. The second rule is to make it mean. Every deck that Nate and I ever built was just totally savage. It might have been bad, but in the right hands, it was capable of great things. The third rule is that I have to use cards that I already own. So no buying singles, no upgrades, just everything from my random pile of nonsense and cards that I've collected over the years. So if it's in my boxes and it fits the budget, I'd say it's fair game. The fourth one is no tutors. Now, a lot of people love tutors, but I don't love tutors because I don't really like having the game play out in the same way or attempt to play the game out in the same way every single time. And honestly, I think without tutors, you have a lot more games that are more like interactive, right? You have more of a strategic approach to trying to figure out how to win. And a lot of times you find out different combos that you didn't even know that you had because you were tutoring things out. And the fifth rule for this is no game changers, because the crew that I play with, yes, they play some amount of game changers in their decks, but I try not to play game changers because in a lot of cases, my skill level differential is a very noticeable thing, and they've told me that. So I don't play game changers in my decks unless I'm explicitly saying I'm playing game changers in my decks, but also I don't really like to have something so good that it puts me miles ahead on the spot. To me, this deck isn't about winning efficiently. It's about making itself as efficient as possible and winning with a very, very terrible set of cards. And a lot of people will say they're not trying to win at a game of Commander, and I don't think that that's the truth. I think that we're all trying to win within a certain confine that makes us feel good about the win. And the sixth and final rule for this is that the total sum of cards in the deck must be less than or equal to the total amount that the commander he sent me, so the actual alternate art version of this commander that he sent me, is worth. Basically, these 6 rules forced me to build in a way that felt so gratifying, right? Like, I didn't net deck. I was creating and crafting at my table just like I did when I first fell in love with the game. And I still do most of the time to this day. But I know a lot of people use like Scryfall to look up cards and synergies. But honestly, I kind of just like to find things that are organic in the wild, and hopefully in some other videos, I'll be able to show you sort of my process in doing so. So now I want to show you what's in this full deck card by card and talk about all of the synergies and why I built it the way that I did. I didn't build this to be competitive, but I did build this to be a strong contender at a casual table and disrupt the game in ways that make your opponents understand the power of cards that were otherwise considered horrible. If we're gonna put this on a bracket-based system, I guess it's bracket 2 in all technicality, but I have taken this deck to a bracket 4 table and actually won the game, and that's just because they left me alone and then I sort of locked everyone down, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about as soon as we get into this. And fun fact about this deck, every single card is converted mana cost 3 CMC or less, which means everything is cheap. So diving into the deck, this is our commander, Squall Seed Mercenary. 2 generic, a white and a black. It is a 3/4 legendary creature, human knight mercenary, with the ability Rough Divide that says whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gains double strike until end of turn. And it also says whenever Squall deals combat damage to a player, return target permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now I'm sure many of you see where we're going with this, but I just want to show you how nasty this can be. So with Squall, we're going to be doing a lot of attacking, specifically with Squall himself. And that is just because Squall is so good. It says I can return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from my graveyard to the battlefield. Permanents also include lands. So fun fact, if you can get some lands in the graveyard, Squall can bring them back and ramp you incredibly fast, which breaks the color pie of black and white, and it's something that I really enjoy about this deck. And also, it can give itself double strike. So this thing can be a pretty nasty threat for lethal of commander damage if you built it like a Voltron deck. But I didn't really build this thing like a Voltron deck, and you'll see what I mean. So the first thing I want to talk about with this deck is actually our ramp package. And we don't really have a ramp package. As you can see, there's only 4 cards, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be returning a lot of our lands from the graveyard to play, and we also just want to play all of our stuff on curve. So we don't really want to spend time ramping to set something up, because our entire deck is 3 mana cost or less. So the first card is Millikin, and this enables our plan. Millikin is a 2-drop 0/1, which you can tap to mill a card and add a colorless. So not only does it enable our first plan of putting everything in the graveyard, it also mills. So it's a really good card specifically for this deck because it hits 2 birds with 1 stone. Our next card is Mindstone, and Mindstone is a 2-drop where you can tap to add a colorless, and you can also tap 1 and sacrifice it to draw a card. I like this card. I don't love this card, but since this deck is kind of a low power level, I think this one fits really well. As far as like a value engine goes, it really contributes to our draw if we need it. And if we do need the ramp to maybe get Squall out on turn 3, it's not a bad thing to draw. The next card is Blitzball, and Blitzball is from the Final Fantasy set. It's 3 generic mana. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, or you can sacrifice this artifact to draw 2 cards, and you can only activate it if an opponent was dealt damage by a legendary creature this turn. Now let me show you why Blitzball is so cool with Squall. Not only is Squall a legendary creature, obviously, but you can do something like this. Because Squall has double strike, you attack with Squall, okay? You hit your opponent, right? You sacrifice your Blitzball before regular combat damage, you draw 2 cards, and then you can use Squall's ability to return the Blitzball to play, and then you can sacrifice the Blitzball to draw 2 more cards. So basically, you can just use the Blitzball and Squall to draw 4 cards. That's because of Squall's ability of dealing combat damage and returning a permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is pretty sick if you ask me. Next, tried and true Soul Ring. It is a 1-drop that taps for 2 generic. If you drop this card on turn 1 against your opponents with the Squall deck, I can guarantee you that you will not lose the game, because you are going to lock down the entire table, which
I'm going to show you how we do that in just a second. Next, we're going to talk about the removal for the deck. So as you can see here, we have Seal of Doom. Seal of Doom is a 3-drop. It is a black and 2 generic enchantment. You can sacrifice Seal of Doom to destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. So the cool thing about this is that you can also return this to play with Squall, just like the Blitzball, and you can kill 2 creatures. So actually, you can kill 3 creatures with this. If you already have Seal of Doom on the field, then you can sacrifice Seal of Doom, blow up one of their creatures with the first trigger of Squall, bring back the Seal of Doom, sacrifice it, destroy a creature, second trigger of Squall, do it again, sacrifice it. But the important thing that you should keep in mind here, and I'm not a judge, so I don't know how to give this to you guys in like the way that a judge would. The way that this works is that the target for Squall's ability is chosen as it's put on the stack, which is immediately after combat damage has been dealt. So that is before any player gets priority to take an action. So what you'll need to do is you need to make sure that you sacrifice this at the right time. Next, we have Dark Blast. And I really like Dark Blast in this deck because not only does it have Dredge, which is if you would draw a card, instead you may put exactly 3 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard. If you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand, otherwise draw a card. It's 1 black, and target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. So not only is this sort of like a targeted removal spell that's really easy to get in the graveyard, but this synergizes so well with some of the other cards that we have in this deck. But I'll just show you an example of one of those later because you have to see how this interacts with some of our deck. Next, we have Executioner's Capsule. It is 1 black artifact. You can tap 2 mana and tap the Executioner's Capsule itself to sacrifice it to destroy target non-black creature. Kind of the same thing as Seal of Doom, but we can recur this over and over Squall and keep our opponent's boards clear while we just chip at them for 3 and attack them with our other creatures, which you'll see later. Next, we have Cathar Commando, another piece of removal for us, except this one has Flash, it's 2 mana, and it allows us to sacrifice itself to destroy target artifact or enchantment. It's also a 3/1, but that's not really relevant because what we want to do is just recur this to keep any sort of threats off the field. We also have Bounty Agent. This is one of my favorite cards in this deck because it gets rid of our opponent's commanders. So it is a 2/2 with Vigilance. You can sacrifice it to destroy target legendary permanent that's an artifact, creature, or enchantment. This card is an absolute house. You can use it to blow up all of your opponent's commanders over and over and over. Now here we go. Here is where we get into some of my favorite things to do with this deck, and this is a Cursed Marauder. It is 1 black, 1 generic, Zombie Warrior 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a non-token creature. So if you just recur this over and over, you can sacrifice itself, keep your Squall Knife safe and protected, and keep your opponents off of any creatures whatsoever because it's a symmetrical effect, and I love symmetrical effects in Commander. Just like this card, Fleshbag Marauder, another symmetrical effect. It is a 3-drop. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacks a creature. It's a 3/1. Does the same exact thing as this Accursed Marauder does, except the benefit of Accursed Marauder is it actually gets around those token decks, which is why Accursed Marauder is just explicitly better than Fleshbag Marauder. But Fleshbag Marauder has a huge place in my heart, and I want to touch on why I actually do like these cards with Dark Blast. So if you have a hard time, like sometimes you can't actually sack the Fleshbag Marauder to itself, and sometimes you have to sack something else to the Fleshbag Marauder in order to bring it back off Squall if you're in a certain situation. The cool thing about Dark Blast is that you can Dark Blast your own Fleshbag Marauder or Dark Blast your own Accursed Marauder, put it in the graveyard, and then it keeps enabling your strategy of putting things in the graveyard. So it's just a really cool way to kind of get rid of the Fleshbag Marauder or the Accursed Marauder so that way you can bring them back again if you have to use your Squall's ability to get out of another situation that you're in. Same thing with Merciless Executioner, literally a copy of Fleshbag Marauder. And Plague Crafter, also kind of a copy of these cards, but when it enters the battlefield, each player sacks a creature or planeswalker, and each player who can't discards a card. So these are kind of like an upside to what we had previously, so this is an auto-include in this deck. Another thing that I like to play is Innocent Blood, especially if I have this early in the game and I don't have my Squall out yet. This card is absolutely phenomenal, and it can put those cards in the graveyard or any of my guys that I need to get back. Then we have one of our only real board wipes, and that is Deluge of Doom. All creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is the number of card types among cards in my graveyard. Since I'm milling myself a lot, I usually have quite a few card types. And this is kind of our like, oh crap, like we need to get out of like dodge moment. This card can save us. It gives us the 3 and helps us to stabilize again, because sometimes it's a little hard to set up stabilization in this deck if you're a little too slow. Next, we have Oblivion Stone. I really like Oblivion Stone. It is one of our other board wipes. It is a 3 generic artifact. You can tap 4 and tap it to put a fate counter on target permanent, and then you can also tap 5 and sacrifice Oblivion Stone to destroy each non-land permanent without a fate counter on it. Then remove all fate counters from all permanents. So the cool thing about Oblivion Stone is that it is a recurable board wipe. So because we're ramping so much with our lands that are going to be in the graveyard with Squall, Oblivion Stone is no problem once we start getting to the mid game. You can also put the fate counter on Squall to keep Squall alive, or if you really need to get out of a situation, then you can just pop the Oblivion Stone in that moment. But I really like having access to a board wipe on a stick that we can use over and over and over again, which is the same thing with Crypt Rats. It's a black and 2 generic. It's a rat 1/1. You can pay X, and Crypt Rat deals X damage to each creature and each player, but you can only spend black mana on X. The good news is most of our lands in this deck that are basics are actually swamps. We have 10 swamps and 5 plains, so pretty much any problem Crypt Rats will be able to solve for us. It can also end the game. We have ways of gaining life. You can also pump all of that excess mana into the Crypt Rats. You can also recur the Crypt Rats with Squall. So this card is a fantastic card in our deck, and I think it's like 9 cents. It's really cheap. So Crypt Rats, OP, super OP. You can also end the game as a draw if you really want to, but there are definitely ways to win with Crypt Rats. I've won with this card many times. So the goal of our removal package is to never ever let any opponents have any creatures on the board. It's a very symmetrical package, and it deals with a lot of the threats and allows us to recur them when we need to. Love this removal package. Now let's talk about some of the ways that we get cards in the graveyard. This is Ghoul Caller's Bell. It is a 1-drop artifact that lets us tap, and then each player puts the top card of his or her library into the graveyard. We really want to focus on getting these sort of permanent abilities that let us put things into the graveyard so we don't run out of gas, but it's also important that they're cheap mana cost, because we need to play our Squall on curve, and we need to get in there and do our thing as soon as possible to lock the entire table down. Another way that we're getting cards in the graveyard is Ransom Note, and it is a 1-drop artifact, and when it enters the battlefield, you surveil 1. You can also pay 2 to sacrifice Ransom Note, which lets us cloak the top card of our library, goad target creature, or draw a card. So it's just a really good sort of piece that lets us fill a lot of different slots and roles in our deck. We also have one of my favorites, which is Codex Shredder. It is also a 1-drop that you can tap. Target player puts the top card of his or her library into the graveyard, which is usually you unless you see an opponent tutor something to the top of their library. Then you target them and you ruin their day. But you can also pay 5 and sacrifice the Codex Shredder to return a card from your graveyard to your hand. So this might be one of our instants or sorceries that we can't recur with our Squall, or it could be anything, and then we can return Codex Shredder to play with Squall that lets us kind of loop value over and over, which we're all about making value in this deck and outvaluing our opponents. Next, we have Golgari Thug. Golgari Thug is a 2-drop 1/1, and when it's put in the graveyard, you can put target creature card in your graveyard on top of your library. That part is kind of cool, and we don't really use it that much. We mostly use it for the dredging. We try to get this thing into the graveyard whenever we need it, so that way we can use the Dredge 4 ability, which lets us mill the top 4 cards of our library, as we talked about with Dark Blast and Dredge earlier, which just puts more fuel to our fire. We also have Perpetual Timepiece. It is a 2-drop artifact. You can tap it to put 2 cards from your library into your graveyard, and you can pay 2 to exile this, and you can shuffle any number of target cards from your graveyard into your library. So let's say there's some like pesky instants or sorceries in your graveyard, or the game goes long, or you're playing against mill. This card fills a lot of roles. It can not only win you a game, but it can save you from losing to an off-meta strategy such as mill. And then we also have Stinkweed Imp, which is kind of like the Golgari Thug, except it's a 3-drop 1/2 flyer. And whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, you destroy that creature. So it has Death Touch, and it also has Dredge 5. So it fuels the graveyard. It does exactly what we need to do. And these are the cards that we use to enable ourselves to get a little extra value into the graveyard, because most of the cards that come in fact, do create value and put themselves in the graveyard, such as like the Fleshbag Marauders and stuff, but we do need a little bit extra fuel for the fire sometimes. We also have Stitcher's Supplier, which when it enters the battlefield or dies, you put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Just another good value piece. Okay, we've talked about removal, we've talked about value. Let's talk about disruption and enabling of our game plan. So, most of these cards make our opponent's lives incredibly annoying. This is Hopeless Nightmare. It is a 1-drop enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life. And when this card is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you scry 2. You can also pay 3 mana to sacrifice it. This card's really good. You can recur it to not only slowly drain your opponents, but you can recur this card over and over to have a symmetrical effect that makes all of your opponents discard a card from your hand. And you really, really love to have your opponents hell-bent with this, where they're just top decking something from the top. And most of the time, it's a creature they're looking for, and then you can use your removal package, bring back like a Fleshbag Marauder, and just blow them out over and over. Next, we have Delirium Skeins. It is a 3-drop sorcery. Each player discards 3 cards. You got to be careful with this one because this one also targets you, so that's really important to remember. But you can use this to fuel your graveyard for Squall if you have some like pesky cards that you really want to return that are stuck in your hand and you just want to put them in the yard. One of my favorite things to do with this is to put lands in the graveyard and then return those lands back into play, which helps us ramp. That's usually the best case scenario with this. But getting rid of 3 cards makes your opponents have a really tough choice to make. And getting rid of 3 cards is 3 less threats that you have to deal with, and it's 3 less options that could mess with our game plan. We also have your Rock's Fenlurker. It is double black, so this is one of the harder cards to cast in our deck. It is very possible. We do cast it all the time, but it is a 1/1 horror that says when it enters the battlefield, each opponent exiles a card from their hand. I really love this card for the fact that it does exile cards from their hands instead of putting them in the graveyard, because that means there's really no way that they can recur them in most cases. It also lets us pay 3 mana, and it gets +3/+3 until end of turn, which mid-late game, this is a great mana sink for us because we're going to have plenty of lands. We also have Miasmic Mummy, which is a 2-drop 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, each player discards a card. This card's great. It's also symmetrical, which we love symmetrical things that affect everybody, making us the villain with this deck. But it can fuel us up because we also have to discard the card. So you have to be very careful with when you play this one. Make sure you're not discarding something that you actually really love and you want. Same thing with Virus Beetle, except each opponent discards a card. I love recurring these opponents discard cards over and over. Man, that was a tongue twister. Over and over because they're really annoying for our opponents. We also have Burglar Rat, which does the same thing. Each opponent discards a card. It's a 1/1. We can use the Dark Blast card to blow this up, and then we can return this back to play with Squall, make people discard more cards. Usually, our opponents have no cards in hand, no creatures on board when they're playing against us. We also have Hecdies from the Final Fantasy set. How could we not play this lovely 2-drop 1/1 Ooze Horror, which also discards a card from each of our opponent's hands? And we have Elderfang Disciple, same thing. And we also have Nezumi Informant, which also does the same thing. The hard part with these is we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're not going to count that one. Recurable, very recurable sources of disruption to our opponent's hands. Our opponents do not like discarding their hands, but it's on them what they choose to discard because it is a choice. It's not like we're thought-seizing them and taking their best card. It's on them how they play and what strategy they use to dig themselves out of the hole that we're kind of digging for them. But something to keep in mind with this deck is that sometimes these little 1/1s will come into play, do their thing, and then we have to find a way to get them into the graveyard. We have to find a way to be able to get them into the graveyard so that way we can recur them and do it all over again. So I'm going to show you how we're actually going to do that. Okay, so besides the more symmetrical homies that I showed off earlier in the deck, we have some more specific enabling of our cards for their value over and over in our game plan. And one of them is Witch's Cauldron. It is a 1-drop black artifact that you can tap 2 and sacrifice a creature to gain a life and draw a card. So we do want to sacrifice our like Elderfang Disciple because then we can just return it to play and make our opponents discard more cards. And we also draw a card and gain a life, which is really useful. So it's just a really, really good synergistic piece with Squall. We also have Priest of the Forgotten Gods, which is a 2-drop. It is a 1/2 human cleric, and we can tap it to sacrifice 2 other creatures, and any number of target players each lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature. We then add 2 and we draw a card. So we can choose other opponents to each lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature, which enables our plan of being symmetrical and just beating people up. We also get to add more black mana and draw a card. So these are all just 2-for-1 value city. We love it. We also have Skull Clamp, which I am shocked how cheap this card is now. This card is absolutely fantastic. It is a 1-drop artifact equipment. You can pay 1 to equip it. Equipped creature gets +1, -1. And when equipped creature is put into a graveyard, we draw 2 cards. So we slap this Skull Clamp on our Elderfang Disciple. Our Elderfang Disciple dies. We draw 2 cards. Then we can recur this thing with Squall Seed Mercenary, make them discard a card, and do it all over again with our Skull Clamp. And we can have a grip of cards for literally 1 mana every single time. It can also work really well with like our Merciless Executioner, for instance. We can just keep looping these things, drawing cards, beating up our opponents over and over and over and over and over. It's beautiful. Next, we have Viscera Seer. Viscera Seer helps us get those cards in the graveyard. We sacrifice a creature and scry 1. So not only does this prevent us from flooding or like drawing duplicates of cards that we don't really need, it's just a really good free sack outlet. We just sacrifice creatures, scry 1 for 1 black, 1/1. We also have Carrion Feeder. It's the same concept, except this thing can get huge. It's a 1-drop, 1/1, sacrifice creature, put a +1 counter on Carrion Feeder. This thing can just beat your opponents down, and you can just keep valuing while they have nothing on board. You just beat them down. Huge beat stick this thing can become. And then we have Soldevi Adnate, which is a 2-drop cleric. We can tap it to sacrifice a black or artifact creature to add an amount of black equal to that creature's mana cost to our mana pool. So not only can this thing ramp us and keep us playing cards from our hand or from wherever we need the mana from, this thing also enables our sacrifice. It is a 1/2 2-drop. This card is super old, so a lot of you probably don't know about it, but it's absolutely fantastic in this deck. Next, we're going to talk about some of the other pieces in our deck, and these are sort of more of generic good cards. Like this is Mask of Memory. We can slap this on our Squall, and every time we deal combat damage to a player, we draw 2 cards, and if we do, we discard a card. So not only does this fuel our graveyard to return things from Squall, but it's only 2 mana, and it's 1 to equip, and it fills up our hand with all the goodness that we could ever need. We also have Morbid Opportunist, another card that lets us draw, and is a 3-drop 1/3. Whenever 1 or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. This card is good, and by each turn, it means each turn. That counts our opponent's turns as well, but on our turn, there is a creature that dies every single turn, allowing us to draw a card. We also have Wall of Omens. It is a 0/4 defender. When it enters the battlefield, we draw a card. We can recur this over and over to draw cards, just like I showed you guys earlier. We also have Tocassia's Welcome. Whenever 1 or more creatures with mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield under your control, you draw a card, and this ability only triggers once each turn. This card's awesome because every single turn we are definitely putting a creature into play with mana value 3 or less and drawing a card. Our entire deck is 3 or less. We also have Welcoming Vampire. It's the same thing, except it's whenever 1 or more other creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, we draw a card. This also only triggers once per turn. But all of these abilities can trigger on our opponent's turns, like say they give us tokens or something. That's usually not the case, but on our turn, they're always going to trigger. We also have Fang, Fearless Icy. Whenever 1 or more cards leave our graveyard, we draw a card and we lose 1 life. This ability only triggers once a turn. We always have cards leaving our graveyard because Squall reanimates them. Or with some of these other cards, we'll show you in a little bit here. Desecrated Tomb kind of follows the same thing. We're out of the draw pile now. This is a 3-drop artifact. Whenever 1 or more creature cards leave our graveyard, we create a 1/1 black creature token with flying. Since we're having so many cards that leave our graveyard all the time, this is fantastic. It floods the board with tokens, enabling us to, in a lot of cases, win the game with sheer value because a lot of people aren't playing flyers and they're probably not going to have creatures on board anyway. We also have Haunted Crossroads. It is a 3-drop enchantment. You can pay 1 black to put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library, which lets us value over and over and over the creatures that we need, even if we don't have Squall out. It also synergizes super well with Fang because whenever one or more cards leave our graveyard, we draw a card, lose a life. It triggers only once each turn. We can do this during our opponent's turns, which means we can get an extra 3 draws just because we want to. We have Liliana the Veil, an X-Modern All-Star, which is one of our very few Planeswalkers in this deck. It's 3 mana. We can +1 it to each player discards a card. We love our symmetrical effects. -2, target player sacrifices a creature, say we need to get rid of an extra creature or even use it on ourselves. Or we can -6 and separate all permanents target player controls into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents in the piles of his choice. This card can pretty much take a player out of the game if you ult it, and since there's probably not going to be very many creatures in play, the only thing that's really going to stop us is a hasty creature or burn spells or some sort of planeswalker removal, which is not that common, honestly. Liliana Heretical Healer. It is a 3-drop, 2/3 lifelink. Whenever another non-creature I control dies, I exile this. Then I return to the battlefield. If I do, I make a 2/2 black zombie. But the other side is why we're really playing this card. Not because this side always triggers for us because we're really kind of like an aristocrats deck in a lot of ways. But this side, each player discards a card, more symmetrical. We can also return non-legendary creature cards to play, enabling us to do whatever we want to do to mess with our opponents. And then it has an emblem that says -8. You get an emblem with whenever a creature dies, return to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. So if we're returning creatures to play that make everyone sack creatures, it's really, really nasty. And our last Planeswalker is Liliana Last Hope. Not only does it kill our opponent's creatures or sometimes kill our own creatures to fuel ourselves, we can -2 it to fuel ourselves and return a creature to our hand. And then the emblem, which we will protect this creature for quite a few turns, says -7. You get an emblem with at the beginning of your end step, you put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is 2 plus the number of zombies you control. This card gets out of hand really, really fast when it ults. We have Victimize, which is a 3-drop sorcery. Choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. Sacrifice a creature. If you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. Fantastic card. Just lets us just go off in a lot of times. And this is kind of one of those things like, if you play this, you're either digging yourself out of a bad situation or you're just crushing everyone under the heel of your foot. We have Blood Fountain. It's a 1 black artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you create a blood token, which is pay 1 colorless, tap it, discard a card, and then draw a card. But the reason that we're playing this is because we can recur our creatures back to our hand over and over, especially if we mill lots of stuff. We can just play stuff from the hand, return stuff from the graveyard. At some point, Squall isn't even that relevant because we're just doing whatever we want to do with all that mana we made. You can pay 4 mana, sacrifice this, and return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, which is absolutely fantastic. We also have Nihil Spellbomb, which is a 1-drop artifact, but you can sacrifice this to exile all cards from target players' graveyards. In a lot of cases, if we're putting cards from people's hands or we are putting stuff in the graveyard from the field, some decks can actually profit off that, so we just play a little bit of an insurance policy. We can also pay black when we sack this to draw a card. Just a good all-around card that we can recur over and over, whether we want to use it for drawing cards or we want to use it for disrupting our opponent's game plan. We also have Selfless Savior. It is 1 white, and this is one of the ways that we use to protect Squall because obviously our deck does need Squall in a lot of cases. We pay 1 white, and it's a 1/1. We can sacrifice Selfless Savior. Another target creature I control gains indestructible until end of turn. We can protect our Squall over and over and over by just returning the Selfless Savior to the field. Most people aren't going to exile it. Most board wipes or removal or destroy, so this card's super good. We also have Assemble the Players. It is a 2-drop enchantment. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. Once each turn, you may cast a creature spell power 2 or less from the top of your library. We have lots of those, so this, in a lot of cases, gives us extra cards to play because we have so much mana from producing it with Squall that we are just going to do whatever we want, and you guys will see what I mean by lots of mana from Squall in a second. We also have Selfless Spirit, much like Selfless Savior. I really love the miscut Selfless Spirit. You see how big that top is on this thing? You sacrifice it, all your creatures gain indestructible to end of turn. Just more protection for the crew. We have Key to the City, which can enable our plan and help us win the game, whether that's through commander damage or getting a really big carrion feeder through. Discard a card. Up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn. When Key to the City becomes untapped, you may pay 2. If you do, you draw a card. So not only can we draw cards, but we can really enable our plan of trying to win the game. We have Lightning Greaves, which a lot of people know what this is. It helps us to give our commander haste and protect it, which is something that we want to do. Equip creature gets haste and shroud. Equip cost is 0, so card's super good, especially if you play this literally at the beginning of the game. We have Zolaport Cutthroat. We love symmetrical effects, and we love when our creatures die. So whenever Zolpor Cutthroat or another creature I control dies, each opponent loses a life, and we gain a life. Pretty easy. We're draining people out. Slow burn, baby. Fungal Fortitude, just another way to protect our Squall. Not only does this card have Flash, it's a 2-drop, enchants the creature. Squall becomes a 5/4 double striker, which is 10 damage, which literally means 3 attacks, and we can kill one of our opponents from commander damage, or if we pump it up a little more, we can kill them in 2 hits. But when it dies, we return it to battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So we can return the Fungal Fortitude with Squall's ability and attach it to him. Just a really good value card for us in this deck. We also have Blackblade Reforged, which is a 2-drop. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land I control, which we are going to have lots of lands in play. And we can equip legendary creature for 3 or equip for 7. So we can put this on pretty much any of our guys, even if it's one of those 1/1s that discards a card in the late game and just start beating people down with a giant creature. Malakir Blood Priest. It is a 2-drop 2/1. It says when Malakir Blood Priest enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures in our party. This is our version of Grey Merchant of Asphodel. We can sacrifice this, bring this back to the field over and over again, and we have lots of rogues, wizards, and itself as a cleric. So usually this thing's hitting for like 2, but a lot of times it's hitting for 3 when it comes back in, and you can just loop it over and over and over and drain everybody at the same time. Love this card. It's Baby Gray Measy. This is the homie. We try to end the game. This is one of the ways. We also have Children of Corliss, which is a 1-drop 1/1. If somebody attacks us, we can take the damage and then sacrifice Children of Corliss, so we gain that life back that we lost this turn. It's a 1-drop, absolutely bonkers card, and we can return this over and over to play with Squall. And we have Expedition Map. I know we're not playing Tutors, but we are playing Expedition Map because this card can search out land that will help us to give Squall unblockable, and just to get through so we can enable our plan of attacking. And then our last non-land card in the deck is Zach Fair, and it is a 1-drop. It enters with a 1/1 counter on it. We can pay 1, sacrifice it. Target creature gains indestructible until end of turn, and we put Zach Fair's counters on it. So like I was talking about earlier with the Fungal Fortitude, if we put a counter from Zach Fair on the Squall, for instance, that'd be 2 attacks for each opponent and they're dead, and we can recur this and protect our Squall at any time, or just pump any of our creatures and recur this at any time and make them huge. It just works really well with this deck. Now for lands, we are light on lands. We're only playing 34 because our mana cost literally caps out at 4 with the commander. So we have Terramorphic Expanse, Vibrant Cityscape, and Evolving Wilds. And these all are like fetch lands. They're fantastic. Sacrifice Terramorphic Expanse, search my library for a basic land, put on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Every single one of these lands does the exact same thing, and we can use Squall to return them to play and just ramp like crazy. So getting one of these is key, and we find them all the time. And then that's another reason we play the Expedition Map, because it can help us to search out one of these so we can just start ramping in black-white, which people never see it coming. We also have Field of Ruin or Ghost Quarter, which allow us to blow up lands. So the cool thing about Ghost Quarter is we can target our own lands and blow them up and then return them to play. But Field of Ruin hits our opponent's lands. If we have a troublesome land the opponent has to deal with, say it's something with Death Touch, or it's trying to beat us down, or it's just stopping us from attacking, these are super good. They solve the problem, and we can recur them and bring them back to play. Now, I mentioned lands that help us get through earlier, and that is Access Tunnel and Rogue's Passage. They will both give our creature unblockable, but careful with Access Tunnel, because if you make your Squall a little bit pumped up, this will not work. These help us to just end the game, get through, and beat our opponents. Next, we have some more utility lands. We have Eden Seed at the Sanctum. We can pay 5 mil to, then sacrifice this land, and then return a permanent card from our graveyard to our hand. We can use this if we need to, if we just need another way to recur. It's just a pretty solid all-around card. Doesn't really affect our mana too much because we're in 2 colors. We also have Bajuka Bog. It is a land that we will use to exile our opponents if they're taking advantage of our strategy. We have Haunted Fengraf. We can pay 3, sacrifice it, return a creature card at random from our graveyard to our hand. Pretty good if we need to. It's just one of those cards. You never know when you're going to need something like this. We also have Dakmor Salvage, which is a land that lets us dredge 2. So let's say we mill this off of one of our mill pieces, then we can mill 2 more because of the Dakmor Salvage, and we get us a land. We have Buried Ruin, which allows us to recur some of our artifacts, which we never know when we will need to do that, just more value on value. And then we have Unholy Grotto. Taps for colorless. We could pay black and tap it, put target zombie card from our graveyard on top of our library. More recursion of our zombies. And then we have Ifnir Deadland, which is a desert that taps for a colorless, or we can pay 1 and tap for a black. We could pay 4, sacrifice this desert, and put 2 -1 counters on a creature an opponent controls. It's just a repeatable removal spell on a stick. Doesn't do anything crazy, but it can be good. Then we have our lands that tap for multiple colors. We have Orzhov Basilica. This is really good. You return to play, bounce a land in your hand, replay the land. Just helps us to go crazy sometimes in the amount of mana we're producing. We have Concealed Courtyard, enters the battlefield tapped unless I control 2 or few other lands, and then we can tap it for a white or a black. And we have Caves of Koilos, taps for colorless, or we can tap for white or black by taking a damage. Command Tower, gotta play this in your commander decks, folks. And then we have Exotic Orchard. Most people are gonna have a black or a white color pairing at the 3 tables. So I don't see why we don't always have a land that taps for 2 colors in most cases. And then we have 10 swamps and 5 plains. These kind of round out, keep our mana nice and consistent. But I think the important thing to note is that when you're playing an annoying deck, you should play white bordered lands because people really hate white bordered lands. It gets them really mad, especially in tournament Magic. So fun fact, if you want to make people mad, just play the most beautiful lands in the game. It's time to give them the deck. I made this for you.
Thank you, Tilk. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it's awesome, but I have no idea what it does. So you'll have to teach me and show me.
He wants to know what the deck does. Codebreaker, what does the deck do?
It kills all our stuff. It makes us discard cards.
Is it strong?
Yes.
So, what is your experience playing against it?
I lose.
Wow!
Nice play.
Wow! Hey Nate, I'm gonna bring this back from the graveyard. Wow! Nice play.
I'm gonna get rid of it again, then.
I know. I can't have a single creature on board, and I got no cards left. Nobody has creatures on the board except Nate, and Codebreaker's got some. Nate just killed me. Look at this board.
Okay. I guess I passed Tim Do.
You're not gonna swing at me?
Oh, I killed you. Sorry.
How did you kill me?
With my commander.
Oh, well then I'll just get their commander.
Oh, what? You're gifting the commander? You're destroying it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to Selfless Spirit. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Dang, it's not destroyed.
After he saved you and everything, you still killed him.
I gotta take him out.